Life back in the 1970s had a totally different rhythm, a different sound, and a completely different set of rules. Today, we live in an era of instant gratification and constant digital connection. But if we look back at the houses we grew up in, we find a world that operated on a completely different logic. We are going to explore 20 normal household habits from 1970s America that were a standard part of our everyday lives. But to the modern generation, they seem absolutely absurd, dangerous, or just plain unbelievable. The plastic-covered living room. Let us remember one of the most sacred and terrifying places in a 1970s home, the formal living room. If you grew up in this era, you know exactly what I am talking about. This room was essentially a museum exhibit inside your own house. The most iconic and absurd feature was the thick, clear plastic slipcovers protecting the good floral sofa and the matching armchairs. Can you hear the loud, unyielding crinkle of that plastic when someone dared to sit on it? In the summer heat, wearing shorts meant your skin would literally stick to the furniture, peeling away with a painful tearing sound when you stood up. This room smelled perpetually of lemon pledge furniture polish and fresh vacuum cleaner bags. Children were strictly forbidden from crossing the threshold unless it was Thanksgiving or the local pastor came over for Sunday dinner. We spent our lives looking at this pristine, perfect room from the hallway. Today, the idea of paying for a room in your house and buying expensive furniture just to wrap it in plastic and never use it seems completely ridiculous. But back then, it was a profound symbol of pride. It was a monument to the family's respectability and hard work. S&H Green Stamps. Another completely normal ritual that seems utterly absurd today was the obsessive collection of S&H Green Stamps. If you lived through the 1970s, you remember the little green squares of paper that dictated where your family bought their groceries and gasoline. Our mothers would stand at the checkout counter at the A&P or the Piggly Wiggly, watching intently as the cashier tore a long strip of stamps from the dispenser. Back at home, the real work began. Sitting at the kitchen table under the warm glow of the overhead light, we would lick those stamps until our tongues tasted like sweet, stale glue. We pressed them carefully into the pages of the little saver booklets. Those booklets were essentially a currency of dreams. Once you filled enough books, you got to open the massive glossy catalog and pick out a reward. It might be a shiny new toaster, an electric blanket, or a set of Pyrex mixing bowls. Today, people just tap a piece of plastic to get automatic cash back. But back then, earning a reward was a physical, collective, family effort. It was about the anticipation, the saving, and the profound satisfaction of redeeming those sticky little stamps for something that made our homes feel just a little bit brighter. The kitchen wall phone and party lines. Let us turn our attention to the telephone, which in the 1970s was not a small computer in your pocket, but a heavy, imposing piece of hardware permanently tethered to the kitchen wall. These phones had long spiraling cords that stretched across the room, constantly tangling into impossible tight knots. But the most absurd part of the telephone culture back then was the sheer mystery of a ringing phone. When that loud mechanical bell echoed through the house, it commanded total attention. You had absolutely no idea who was on the other end of the line. There was no caller ID, no glowing screen to check. It could be your best friend, a wrong number, or a long-distance call from a relative. You had to physically pick up the heavy plastic receiver and say hello to find out. And if you lived in a rural area, you might have even had a party line where multiple houses shared the exact same phone line. You would pick up the receiver to make a call only to hear your neighbor down the street gossiping about the weather. You had to politely hang up and wait your turn. Having a private conversation meant stretching the cord around the corner and whispering into the receiver, praying your mother was not listening. The stovetop bacon grease can. Step into the 1970s kitchen, and you will find a practice that would make modern cardiologists faint. Sitting proudly on the back of the stove, usually in an old metal Folgers or Maxwell house. Coffee can was the family bacon grease supply. In our homes, absolutely nothing was wasted. When Mom made bacon for Sunday breakfast, the leftover liquid gold was carefully poured into that metal tin where it would solidify into a thick, white, salty paste. That coffee can simply lived on the stove at room temperature week after week. It was the secret ingredient to absolutely everything we ate. We used a spoonful of it to fry eggs, to pop corn, and to flavor a giant pot of green beans. That savory, smoky smell is the defining scent of a 1970s kitchen. Today, people buy expensive bottles of extra virgin olive oil or fancy avocado sprays, and they shudder at the thought of keeping unrefrigerated animal fat in a tin can on the counter. But back then, that grease was a culinary treasure passed down from the habits of the Great Depression. It was frugal, it was normal, and we all survived it just fine with much tastier green beans. Play till the street lights come on. Think back to the absolute freedom we had as children, a freedom that seems terrifying to parents today. On a warm summer morning, the heavy wooden screen door would slam shut behind us, and we were banished to the outdoors until evening. We had no cell phones, no tracking devices, and absolutely no adult supervision. Our entire world was the neighborhood block. We rode our heavy Schwinn bicycles without helmets, jumping over homemade ramps built from scrap wood and cinder blocks. When we got thirsty, we did not run inside for a bottled water. We drank straight from the green rubber garden hose attached to the side of the house. Do you remember that warm, distinct taste of rubber and brass on a hot July afternoon? Our parents had no idea exactly where we were or what we were doing, and they did not care as long as we obeyed the one universal law of 1970s childhood. You had to be home the exact moment the streetlights flickered on. That humming glow of the street lamp was our dinner bell. The profound trust our parents had in our community is something that has almost entirely vanished from the modern American childhood. Inescapable household smoke and ashtrays. Now let us talk about the atmosphere inside the house. Literally, in the 1970s, smoking was not just a habit. It was an inescapable part of the American domestic environment. The most absurd evidence of this was the sheer number of ashtrays scattered throughout the home. Even if your parents did not smoke, they had ashtrays proudly displayed on the coffee table, the dining table, and the nightstands just out of pure politeness for visiting guests. These were not small, hidden items. They were massive, heavy pieces of amber glass or ornate ceramic art. As children, we even made uneven, lumpy clay ashtrays in elementary school art class to give to our parents for Mother's Day or Father's Day. The smell of stale tobacco smoke was woven into the heavy fabric drapes, the shag carpet, and the upholstery of our cars. People smoked in the grocery store, in hospitals, and at the kitchen table while drinking their morning coffee. The perpetual blue haze that hung in the air of a 1970s living room is something modern generations can scarcely imagine. It was a completely different social contract regarding health and personal space. The human TV remote and rabbit ears. Let us revisit the nightly ritual of watching television. In the 1970s, the television set was a massive piece of wooden furniture that dominated the living room, often built by Zenith or Magnavox. But the truly absurd part was how we changed the channel. There were no remote controls sitting on the couch. Instead, the youngest child in the family acted as the human remote. Your father would say, "Change it to channel 4," and you would walk over and grab the stiff, heavy plastic dial. You had to turn it with force, feeling the loud, mechanical clunk, clunk, clunk as it moved through the numbers. And if the picture was snowy, the whole family engaged in the delicate art of antenna adjustment. We would wrap strips of aluminum foil around the metal rabbit ear antennas, twisting them into strange shapes. Sometimes you had to stand on one foot and hold the antenna just right so your father could watch Walter Cronkite deliver the evening news. If you let go, the screen would turn back into a fuzzy blizzard of static. The sheer physical effort required just to watch 3 available broadcast channels is a lost art of household cooperation, washing and reusing disposable items. Another household habit that perfectly captures the 1970s is the meticulous washing and reusing of disposable items. Today, plastic bags and aluminum foil are thrown into the trash without a second thought. But our mothers, many of whom were raised by parents who survived the Great Depression, viewed waste as a cardinal sin. If you walked into a 70s kitchen, it was incredibly common to see flimsy plastic Ziploc sandwich bags washed out with dish soap and left to dry upside down over wooden spoons or draped over the faucet. Aluminum foil was treated like precious metal. If it covered a casserole dish, Mom would carefully take it off, wipe the food off with a sponge, smooth out the wrinkles on the countertop, and fold it up to be used again. We reused butter tubs as Tupperware to store leftovers, filling the refrigerator with matching plastic margarine containers that held everything from spaghetti sauce to leftover meatloaf. This intense frugality seems absurd in our modern disposable culture. But looking back, there was a quiet dignity in taking care of what you had, in making things last, and in respecting the value of every single penny. Friday night TV dinners. Friday nights in a 1970s household often brought a special culinary treat that we considered the absolute height of modern convenience, the frozen TV dinner. But we did not eat these at the dining room table. We ate them in the living room on wobbly metal folding tray tables adorned with painted floral patterns or faded pictures of birds. Mom would pull the heavy aluminum trays out of the oven. They were scorching hot to the touch. You had to carefully peel back the stiff foil to reveal the compartments of food. There was usually a salty Salisbury steak bubbling in dark brown gravy, a square of perfectly uniform mashed potatoes, extremely mushy peas, and the absolute best part, the little corner compartment containing an apple or cherry cobbler that was always hot enough to burn the roof of your mouth. The foil divider never quite worked, so the gravy always bled into the peas, but we did not care. Standing in front of the warm glow of the television set, eating our specialized little meals while watching the Brady Bunch or the Partridge Family felt like a glamorous luxury. It was the future of dining, served on a flimsy metal tray, riding in the station wagon wayback. If you want to talk about absurd habits, we must discuss how families traveled together. The 1970s was the golden age of the great American station wagon. These were massive steel land yachts, usually adorned with fake wood paneling along the side. But the truly shocking part was what happened inside the car. Seatbelts were entirely optional, if they were even visible beneath the hot vinyl seats. When Mom went to the grocery store, she would just fold down the rear seats to create a cavernous cargo area known as the wayback. All the neighborhood kids would crawl into the back, tumbling around with the brown paper grocery bags and rolling watermelons as the car went around tight corners. In the summer heat, our bare legs would stick to the scalding hot vinyl upholstery, and we would fight for a breeze from the rolled-down windows, inhaling the heavy scent of leaded gasoline exhaust. We would sit backward, making funny faces and waving at the drivers in the cars behind us. The absolute lack of safety regulations seems terrifying today. But back then, riding unbuckled in the wayback was just the normal way we got across town. Defrosting the freezer. Maintaining a kitchen in the 1970s involved one specific dreaded chore that has completely disappeared from modern life: defrosting the freezer. Refrigerators back then were not frost-free. Over the course of a few months, a creeping solid glacier of white ice would slowly take over the inside of the icebox, shrinking the usable space until you could barely fit a frozen pizza inside. When the ice got too thick, Mom would declare it was defrosting day. She would unplug the massive appliance and spread thick bath towels all over the linoleum floor to catch the flood. Then came the physical labor. We would take a dull butter knife or a wooden spatula and start chipping away at the massive blocks of ice. Sometimes she would place a shallow pan of boiling water inside the freezer to speed up the melting process. You would hear the satisfying heavy thud as a huge chunk of frost finally broke loose and crashed onto the floor. It was a messy, wet, all-afternoon chore that required patience and physical effort. Today, appliances manage themselves silently, but back then, we had to physically fight the ice just to keep our food cold. Living room encyclopedias. Let us remember how we found information before the internet existed. In almost every respectable 1970s home, taking up an enormous amount of space on a heavy wooden bookshelf in the living room or den, was a complete set of encyclopedias, often bound in heavy leather or faux leather with shiny gold lettering on the spine. These books were our Google. They had a very distinct, rich smell of dense paper and binding glue. Buying a set of the Encyclopedia Britannica or the World Book was a massive financial investment for a family. Sometimes a traveling salesman would literally knock on the front door to sell them, or mothers would buy them one volume at a time at the local supermarket checkout over the course of 26 weeks. If you had a school report due on the geography of Brazil or the history of the steam engine, you sat cross-legged on the shag carpet, pulled out the heavy volume for the letter B or S, and copied the information by hand. Knowledge was not instantly accessible in the air. It was a physical heavy object that lived in your house, a symbol of a family's dedication to their children's education. Sending kids to buy cigarettes. One of the most mind-boggling household habits of the 1970s involved a simple errand to the corner store. It was incredibly common for a mother or father to write a quick note on a scrap of paper, hand it to their 8-year-old child along with a crumpled dollar bill and a few shiny silver quarters, and send them walking down the street to buy cigarettes. You would walk into the local pharmacy or the small neighborhood grocery store, hand the handwritten note to the adult behind the counter, and say, "My dad needs a pack of soft-pack Pall Malls or Winston Reds." The shopkeeper would smile, hand the cigarettes to a child barely tall enough to see over the counter, count out the change, and send you on your way. Nobody called the authorities. Nobody even blinked an eye. It was an era of profound neighborhood trust, where everyone knew exactly who your parents were and where you lived. The community acted as an extension of the household. The idea of a small child buying tobacco for an adult today is completely illegal and unthinkable. But for us, it was just another chore on a Saturday morning. The backyard burn barrel. Another weekend household chore that filled the air with a very specific 1970s aroma was burning the household trash. Long before municipal recycling programs or plastic garbage bags were common everywhere, many families disposed of their paper waste right in their own backyard. There was usually a rusty heavy metal 55-gallon drum sitting out by the alleyway or behind the garage, often with holes punched in the sides for ventilation. On a Saturday afternoon, Dad would carry out the cardboard boxes, the old newspapers, and the junk mail, toss them into the metal barrel, and strike a match. The thick smoke would billow up into the sky, and you could hear the loud crackle of the burning paper. The distinct, acrid smell of wood smoke and burning cardboard would drift through the entire neighborhood, mixing with the scent of freshly cut grass and charcoal grills. Neighbors would stand by their fences, chatting through the haze. Today, local ordinances strictly forbid backyard incinerators due to air quality and safety concerns. But in our childhood, tending the burn barrel was a normal, hypnotic ritual of household maintenance. The unlocked front door, perhaps the most beautiful and absurd habit of the 1970s household, was our relationship with the front door. To put it simply, we never locked it. During the day, the heavy interior wooden door was left wide open to catch the cross breeze, with only the flimsy metal latch of the screen door keeping the bugs out. If a neighbor needed to borrow a cup of sugar or wanted to chat, they did not formally ring the doorbell and wait. They just pulled open the squeaky screen door, stuck their head into the kitchen, and yelled out a friendly greeting. Our homes were not heavily fortified fortresses designed to keep the world out. There were no alarm systems constantly beeping, no video doorbells recording every movement on the porch. We left the keys in the ignition of our cars in the driveway. We slept with the windows wide open on warm summer nights. The profound sense of security and implicit trust we had in our neighbors is something that modern society has completely lost. We felt safe because we knew everyone, and everyone knew us. The unlocked front door was the ultimate symbol of a connected American community. Shag carpeting and bathroom shag. We must take a moment to look down at our feet and remember the most absurd decorating trend of the 1970s. Shag carpeting. It was everywhere. It was a deep, fibrous jungle of thick yarn that covered our floors in aggressively loud colors like avocado green, harvest gold, or burnt orange. This carpet was so incredibly long and thick that walking on it barefoot felt like wading through a synthetic meadow. The sheer maintenance required for this flooring was ridiculous. Regular vacuum cleaners could not handle the deep pile. So families actually purchased special plastic carpet rakes. You would literally rake your living room floor to make the fibers stand up straight and look neat before company arrived. And in the ultimate display of bizarre 1970s luxury, many homes even had shag carpeting installed directly in the bathroom, cut perfectly to fit around the base of the toilet and the bathtub. The hygienic implications of damp bathroom carpet are horrifying to think about today, but back then, sinking your toes into that thick, warm green yarn while getting out of the shower felt like absolute royalty. The hardware store tube tester. When something broke in a 1970s household, our first instinct was entirely different than it is today. We did not immediately throw the broken item in the trash and drive to a big box store to buy a cheap plastic replacement. We fixed things. Things were heavy, expensive, and built to be repaired. If the television stopped working, Dad did not throw it out. He opened the back panel, carefully pulled out the hot glass vacuum tubes, and drove them to the local hardware store or the pharmacy. There was a massive machine right in the aisle where you could plug the tubes in to test them. If you could not fix it yourself, you called the local repairman. A man in a uniform would literally drive to your house, walk into your living room with a heavy leather satchel full of specialized tools and a tube caddy, and fix the television right there on the shag carpet. We had an entirely different relationship with our possessions. We respected the machinery that made our lives easier, and we believed in repairing and maintaining our homes down to the very last wire. It was an era of genuine craftsmanship and household resourcefulness, waiting for film to develop. Let us recall the agonizing and wonderful habit of capturing family memories. In the 1970s, taking a photograph was a deliberate, expensive act. You loaded a small yellow box of Kodak film into your heavy camera, carefully winding it and hoping you did not accidentally expose it to the light. You only had 12 or 24 shots on a single roll, so you did not waste them. Every single click of the shutter had to count. But the most absurd part to a modern teenager would be the waiting. When the roll was finally finished, often months later, you would drive to a small freestanding photo kiosk in a shopping center parking lot to drop off the plastic canister. Then you waited a whole week. You had absolutely no idea if the pictures of your summer vacation were in focus, if someone blinked, or if the flash even worked. Picking up that paper envelope of glossy prints, smelling the harsh chemical developer, and flipping through the photos in the car was a thrilling household ritual. We held those physical memories in our hands, cherishing them in heavy, sticky photo albums because they were rare and precious. The porch milkbox. Even into the early 1970s, in many American neighborhoods, we still maintained a beautiful personal connection to the food that arrived at our homes. Sitting right on the concrete of the front porch was a silver insulated aluminum box. This was the dairy box. In the quiet, misty hours of the early morning, long before the family woke up, the local milkman would pull his truck up to the curb. You could hear the distinct musical clink of thick glass bottles against his metal wire carrier as he walked up the driveway. He would open the box, retrieve the empty glass bottles we had rinsed out the night before, and replace them with fresh ice-cold milk. Often, the milk was not homogenized, so a thick layer of rich cream would float right at the top under the paper cap. If Mom needed extra butter or a carton of eggs for a special recipe, she did not send a text message. She simply left a handwritten note tucked inside one of the empty bottles. This daily quiet exchange was a gentle reminder that our households were seamlessly connected to the local farms and the working people of our community. The midnight TV sign-off. Finally, we come to the most profound and poetic habit of all, the ritual that ended our day. In the 1970s, the world actually went to sleep. The television did not broadcast a never-ending stream of content 24 hours a day. Sometime after midnight, the local stations would literally sign off. If you stayed up late, the late-night movie would end, and a deep, solemn announcer's voice would come on the air. He would formally thank you for watching, wish you and your family a safe and peaceful good night, and then the station would play a beautiful orchestral rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner while showing footage of a waving American flag or a fighter jet soaring through the clouds. When the song ended, the screen would switch to a geometric test pattern accompanied by a loud, continuous tone. Moments later, the screen would collapse into a mesmerizing blizzard of hissing static. It was a hard, definitive boundary. The broadcast day was over. The universe was gently telling you to turn off the heavy wooden box, turn out the lamps, and go to sleep. It was a shared moment of national closure that brought a beautiful, quiet peace to our homes. When we look back at all these absurd, messy, and wonderful habits, we realize a profound truth. We do not necessarily miss the heavy rotary phones or the frozen TV dinners, and we certainly do not miss chipping ice out of the freezer. What we truly miss is the feeling of that era. We miss the slow, deliberate pace of our days. We miss the deep, unbreakable connection we had with our neighbors, the safety of an unlocked front door, and the physical reality of a world that we could touch and repair with our own hands. Most of all, we miss the people who sat in those living rooms with us. If this journey back in time brought a smile to your face, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so we can continue to share these beautiful pieces of our history together. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these 1970s household habits do you miss the most? Or what is a special memory from your childhood home that we completely forgot to mention? Please write your personal story in the comments below. Let us keep the memories of our magical decades alive together.